Soup for President, Chapter 2. Now, ordered Miss Kelly. But we didn't mean it, said Soup. Perhaps not, Miss Kelly said in her patient voice, a sound which held neither joy nor anger. But I mean it. Luther, you and Robert will not sit together for the rest of the day. We're real sorry, Miss Kelly, I said as I got up to my feet beside the double desk. Bending over, I picked up the red can rubber that Soup had so expertly used to snap my sore ear with. It still smarted. Soup didn't budge. Instead, his eye stayed fixed on Miss Kelly's right hand, the one that Soup called her gun hand. Our teacher possessed the fastest right east of Lake Champlain and west of New Hampshire. Not one single cowboy in all the Saturday movies that were ever cranked out, not even Buck Jones or Tom Mix, whipped a faster draw with a Colt 44 six-shooter than Miss Kelly could muster with her ruler. And then there it was, up and leveled at Soup and me. 12 mean inches of heartless hickory with an edge of cold steel held in her steady and able fingers. I heard Soup swallow. Soup and I separated quickly as Miss Kelly's weapon had a long range of uses, disciplinary as well as geographical. Her ruler could point out Ethiopia with the same facility that it used to maintain the high standards of schoolroom conduct. Soup then sat with Allie and I remained alone. Order restored, Miss Kelly's ruler returned to its holster, the center drawer of her desk. What year are we in? Asked Miss Kelly. The heavenly hand of Norma Jean Bissell took flight, a blend of grace and scholarship. It's 1936, she said, as I listened to her recitation with unwavering devotion. She wasn't like the other girls. She was Norma Jean Bissell. Yes, agreed Miss Kelly. It is September 1936. Who can tell us what event to expect this coming November? Janice Riker's face suddenly brightened with a rare burst of insight. I know, she said. Pa said our cows to freshen. Miss Kelly sighed. No one heard her sigh, but I saw her do it, because it was what Miss Kelly always did following a recitation by Janice Riker. It sort of made me laugh. A big mistake. Janice caught me smiling and held up her knuckles. Janice had fists the size of cannonballs and both were twice as hard. As my hand shot to cover my grin, I knew for sure and certain that I was in for it, and Janice Riker would get me after school. Congratulations, said Miss Kelly. A new calf is always welcome. However, the event that I had in mind was one of a political nature. Like voting, said Soup. Yes, said Miss Kelly. Now what is going to happen in November? I know, I said. Everybody all over the town knows. Alf Landon is going to whoop the tar out of that Democrat. As I saw Miss Kelly's eyebrows lift slightly, I began to wonder what I'd said wrong. Then it sort of hit me. I'd said a dirty word. Democrat. Gee, I said quickly, I didn't mean to say that word. It just sort of slipped out. As I apologized, my eyes couldn't help wandering over to the washstand in the corner upon which rested, in its usual puddle of yellow goo, the big brown bar of laundry soap. The bar of octagon served a dual purpose, cleansing hands and foul mouths. The latter function supervised personally by Miss Kelly's insistence on clean language. I won't ever say that word again. Which word, Robert? As Miss Kelly asked the question, I saw the smile lift her chin. Even though she had gray hair and was near to 100 years old, there wasn't one doggone soul in all of Vermont who could smile the way our teacher smiled. When her face was happy, she could sugar you like a donut, and right now, she was trying not to smile, even though she knew that all over town, most folks agreed that Democrat was a dirty word. Again, I looked at the soap. Despite the fact, said Miss Kelly as she sort of sank weakly into her chair, that many of us in town are Republicans, I believe we can speak of both parties, Democrat and Republican, without further fear of embarrassment. It was my turn to sigh. Robert, you may put your hand down. And to resume, in November, your mothers and fathers will vote to elect a new president. Miss Kelly was a solid Republican. Who, asked Miss Kelly, can name one of our great presidents of the United States? George Washington, we all said. Abraham Lincoln, we all said. And, waited Miss Kelly, Calvin Coolidge, we all said. Yes, nodded Miss Kelly, as Calvin Coolidge was the only president to ever come from Vermont, we all chorused. And where is Landon from? Kansas, we said after a quiet moment of deliberation. Janice Riker mumbled, the capital of England. I wasn't sure where Kansas was, but I figured it was probably closer than Ethiopia. We sort of felt sorry for President Roosevelt because he had to admit he was from New York. To be inch and honest about it, I really didn't know too much about President Roosevelt except that his first name was Franklin, but I think his pals in the Rough Riders all called him Teddy. Thus, said Miss Kelly, when November comes, who will elect the president? People that vote, said Soup, and they add up the votes by states, not just by the numbers and stuff. Very good, Luther, said Miss Kelly to Soup. We are all pleased that you've chosen to gain our attention by achievement rather than by distraction. Soup cracked a wide grin. He got the highest marks in the whole school, and that was some honor, seeing as there were 28 of us. Soup's report card always said A in geography, spelling, reading, writing, arithmetic. But he never got an A in deportment. His pa asked him once what department was, and he told him it was like playing store in the Emporium up in Burlington. When it came to getting away with pranks and stuff like that, Soup was a greased eel. The thought has occurred to me, Miss Kelly continued, that in order to better understand our national election, we could have our very own election right here at school. You mean? Asked Eddie Tacker. Some of us would be Republicans and some of us would be Democrats? Exactly, said Miss Kelly. Edward, you've made an excellent suggestion. So who wants to be a Republican? 28 hands went up. Who wants to be a Democrat? 28 hands went down. Miss Kelly mused. This poses a bit of a problem. However, I think we can resolve it if we create new names for our two parties. Let's have some suggestions. Elephants, I said. Zebras, shouted Soup. Lions, tigers, bears, snakes, pollywogs, tadpoles, and bedbugs were also mentioned, as well as Boston Red Sox and New York Giants, until Miss Kelly commanded our silence. She warned us that unless we became orderly, there would be little chance of a new football. Ah, she said, I have it. We have 14 boys and 14 girls. Boys, you may all leave the room to return in 5 minutes. You will decide on a name for your party and select one of you to run for president. The girls will remain inside and do likewise while I wrestle with the window. Out into the September afternoon we tumbled, 14 boys from 1st grade through 6th, all of us eager to be president. Eddie Tacker nominated himself, but seeing as he had to stand up against Soup and me and Raleigh, he didn't have a prayer. Eddie Tacker was the second toughest kid in school. Nobody, not even Eddie, was tougher than Janice. We held a convention, consisting of Soups sitting on Eddie's head, while Raleigh McGraw and I tied a few knots in his fingers. A defeat like this can ruin a political career, and the upshot of our deliberations was that Soup would run for president on the boys' tickets. We called ourselves the Apes. Miss Kelly, yelled Soup, we're all ready to come back inside. Do you have a candidate? She called, leaning from the window. No, I said, all we've got is Soup. She looked at the dust on Eddie Tacker's shirt front with a practiced eye. I figured Miss Kelly was about to comment about the grime of the political arena, but she held off. Are the girls ready yet? Asked Soup. No, Miss Kelly answered. They can't seem to agree. On what? The girls have no candidate as yet. Miss Kelly came outside. It isn't going to be Janice, is it? I asked, a bit apprehensive. Miss Kelly cleared her throat. It will be anyone chosen by their party. The candidate and the party name will be entirely their decision and not mine. Wetting her hanky with her tongue, Miss Kelly removed a smudge of dirt from beneath Eddie Tacker's ear. Soup was smiling, a gesture Miss Kelly chose to ignore. Thank you, Miss Kelly, said Eddie. You're quite welcome, Edward. I never could figure out how somebody as smart as Miss Kelly could like people such as Eddie Tacker or Janice Riker. Maybe that was why she was such a good teacher. But I knew that all the kids in the whole darn school, Miss Kelly liked me the best. On that, I would bet every penny I had in the bank. 14 cents. Girls were screaming. Darn you, Janice! Somebody yelled. A shoe came flying out the school window, followed by its mate, and then by several girlish faces. The errant shoes were retrieved and order restored, Parliamentary process was once again underway. We boys went back inside. Have you girls made up your minds? Miss Kelly asked, when every fidgeting body was again wedged beneath desk and bench. Yes, the girls shrieked. Raleigh McGraw was announced at Miss Kelly's request that Soup would run for president and represent the apes. We, all the boys, thumped our chests and grunted to signify tribal unity. Even with no fast draw of her ruler, Miss Kelly asked for order. Quietly, we heard Miss Kelly ask Janice to stand up and make the opposing political announcement. Janice looked like she wanted to kick somebody with her red high-top sneakers. And the name of your party? Asked our teacher. Janice said, We're the Amazons. Dumb name, whispered Soup. I think they fought to see who'd get Brazil. Who is your candidate? Miss Kelly asked Janice. Norma Jean Bissell. My heart sank.